This thing? This thing. Pop, 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 julep. Pop, 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 julep. Pop, 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 julep. Pop, 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 pop. And you know what? I think it's funny. I think it's on like a delay, so I don't think it works. I think what actually went live, like we were live for a second, and now it's going to go to the intro thing, so people are going to hang out for like 10 seconds as that loops. I guess I have to start that a lot earlier. It's a lot closer to real time than I thought. So anyway, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Effing Growth. As you can see, we're experimenting with format and production quality. So anyway, sit back, enjoy the show. Today, we're going to talk all about how we use events and how you can use events to kind of grow with Webflow. Events are a big part of what we do, and actually we're going to get into some of that at the disclaimer. We'll talk a little bit about that because events started with Finsweet. As I came over, it's one of the reasons I'm here at Finsweet. It's a big part of community. Everyone talks about community and how important part of marketing that is, right, for a modern business. But what does community actually mean in the context of, you know, online events? Right? What is that one-on-one connection? What does that mean to build one-to-one and one-to-many relationships? And how can you use that to grow your business? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode today. But before we get too far into this thing, let's F and grow. Okay. So what's up, Joe?
Hey, how's it going? All good here.
I'm still laughing at the intro. I try to do this like opening scene for the intro and not having it when the thing goes live. And then it's like, it starts with us and then goes to the, hey, we'll be live soon, and then comes back. It's funny.
Yeah, that happens with testing. You know, we're trying new things here. That's expected. We do that a few times and it's going to be golden.
Yeah, Maria, what's up? Saying what an intro. Michael Rose, what's up? Hey, all. Let's go to these comments real quick and put some of these up on the screen. Hey, all. What's up, Michael Rose? Lizzie Curtis, what's up? Maria Carava. What an intro. Jose Arce is here. What's up? Let's see who else is in the house. Kenneth Christensen. Hello, says Tanette. Magdalena's in the house. Vimalan. Daniel Brasano, Babas, what is up? Octane Web Services. Joel Whitaker's in the house too. So this is going to be like training. If you want to, you know, get a shout out, drop a comment early in the screen there. We appreciate everyone who hangs out with us. We'll try to get to more of those comments as we go. But what's up, Joe? What are your thoughts here as we get into discussing events?
Well, we're still amped up about No Code Conference. That's how this episode came to be, that we're still thinking about events. We're still talking about events because the event 2 weeks ago was really, really good.
Yeah.
So we're still talking about it. I know people will continue to talk about it for the next few weeks. And yeah, I'm ready to talk about it right now.
Nice. Let's before we do that real quick, like we usually do, we've got a few announcements and then we'll jump into a disclaimer. So let's jump into a couple announcements real quick. I'm going to actually go full screen on the monitor here, and let's get to the first one. We've got Floxies are doing an event tomorrow, I believe it is. They have their Wednesday event. Let's see. I know I have a note about this. Okay, Joel Sousa on Freelancing Online Isn't Hard. So that's tomorrow. Check them out at floxiescommunity.webflow.io. You can also join their Discord right there. You can see there's 43 of them online right now. So women in no code, women in design, that's a great place to go and connect with those ladies. Shout out to anyone who's in the audio, Claudia, Miriella, Maria, all the ladies over there. We appreciate you. Right after that, we've got Connor Finlayson. They're returning for No Code Talk number 6. These are cool. They just get together and chat. If you don't know Connor Finlayson or Aaron Kornblit, both of them are gems in the Webflow community. And yeah, stop by tomorrow and check that out if you're interested in learning more. I think they're going to talk about Webflow, Airtable, you know, automations, things like that. They always get into that stuff. Let's see, automate Aaron Connor return. Yeah, that's the note. Okay, events. We've got an Atlanta meetup. We talked about this last week. We're doing on December 8th a meetup in Atlanta, Webflow and No Code Happy Hour. We talked about doing the Ugly Sweater Party, but that's going to be an online-only event on the 9th, I believe. So we're not going to, we'll announce that later. This is just going to be a hangout with the logistics of trying to like stream at a location and being worried about, you know, numbers of people and where the venue was, we just decided to do a hangout. So join us on the 8th if you're in the Atlanta area. We're going to do something online for that Webflow Ugly Sweater Party that we will announce on Twitter. And speaking of Twitter, let's go and shout out a few. We wanted to start shining a little bit of light on folks who are kind of interacting with us on Twitter and sharing thoughts, resources, things related to Finsweet. So first thing we wanted to run through a couple of these. RR Aberrett on Black Friday gave a clonable resource hub here. It uses the Finsweet attributes system. You can check that out. I think we're sharing the tweets in real time, Joe. So Joe's sharing these in the comments as we go if you're interested in looking at some of these resources. Next up, Gabriel Shays rebuilt the Jarvis AI homepage, which is really cool, actually. Let's take a quick look at this. Actually, you know what? I think this is going to give me audio, so let me mute this tab. Yeah, so he rebuilt the Jarvis.ai website in Webflow using client first. Super cool. Check that out. I do believe this is available. It may not be actually as a clonable, but you can check that out. It's super cool to see people using the client first system to rebuild things in Webflow. Let's see, Dan Anise. This Reloom library, if you haven't checked that out, it's live on Product Hunt right now. Again, this uses Client First by Finsweet. Super cool product. Great to see the community taking things like this and kind of making it their own. So give that some love on Product Hunt there. And then Jonathan Holden, who's usually in our audience. Jonathan and Miriella released a podcast where Jonathan interviews Mirella and they talk about accessibility. They geek out on Webflow a little bit and share a little bit about their personal story with the products. So check that out as well. Shout out to Jonathan for taking the plunge and starting a podcast. We talk about that all the time. We talk about creating content and, giving back to the community. So good on you, Jonathan, for doing that. And let's see. Oh, this was cool. I really wanted to shout this out because this is something that comes up often. It's a tweet here by Big Side Tech. The subtle placement of putting happiness on the team before clients shows how that's Finsweet is on the right path for becoming the top leaders in the Webflow space under Joe Krug's leadership. Joe, you struck a chord here, and if you can read here, it says, first thing to know is that we don't make decisions at Finsweet money, but the part that's highlighted is we make decisions based on how it will benefit our team, our clients, and our community, which surprisingly enough usually leads to more money. Joe, any thoughts on this as just like a high-level strategy? I know this is a big thing for you. This is something that comes up all the time as we talk about this stuff. Any thoughts on seeing this suite?
Yeah, absolutely. It felt really good to see people resonate with this type of comment. I wrote this maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little over 2 years ago, and I still feel the exact same way about it. This is all about giving people what they want, giving people value, giving people really important things that will help their business. And all of this leads to more money. So that's really where this comment comes from, and I truly believe it. It really, you think about money second, you get more of it.
Nice. Okay, so the last one we've got, and again, that goes just to the whole culture here. That resonates through the whole culture here at Finsweet. And the last one is Webflow memes. If you're not finding this account, I thought this was relevant with all the client first mentions. Give Webflow memes a follow there. Just always funny memes on different things related to Webflow. So actually, let's get rid of these graphics so you can see the whole thing. So it's just silly, always coming up with stuff. It's just good fun to, to interrupt your Twitter scrolling there. Give that Webflow memes account a follow. And let us know what you think about this section. This is something new, this tweets and shout out section. We want to show some love to the community, for engaging and interacting with us, maybe incentivize some of that behavior. So share something cool if you'd like to see us highlight in the show. If you didn't like this part of the show, let us know in the comments. If you did like this part of the show, let us know in the comments. Should we do more of this, less of this? Let us know as we move forward, as we go. And I think, what's next, Joe? I think we go into the disclaimer from this, don't we?
Yeah, I'm going to give one
that's right.
more shout out. And this is a shout out to Demetris Theophanis. We recently released attributes. We're finding a lot of people come up with very unique use cases and little things that we do have to go and patch up. We're doing all of this stuff in real time. We have a lot of awesome updates just in the past week. And I'm giving the shout out to Demetrius because he almost felt like he was testing for us, like he was part of the team doing some tests. He tested out a beta version. He gave us feedback. He helped patch up a couple of very unique use cases. And yeah, big thanks for that. If you're using attributes, come and talk to us about it. In whatever channel you feel comfortable communicating to us in, we're listening in all of them, and we want to work with you to make this library the best. So great job, everyone in the community, using, testing, and working with us on this.
Nice. Great. And yeah, feel free to leave feedback. I mean, you can reach us on Twitter. You can join one of the Slack channels. There's a number of places you can reach and connect with us. Okay, I think that's it. Let's jump right into the disclaimers then. Disclaimer number 1. Planning events is hard. So first things first, like, event planning is hard, especially in the modern world. Getting people to commit their time to doing something like other than whatever they want to do in that moment is hard, right? We're going to talk about online events. We're going to talk about in-person events. We're going to talk about the strategy behind them, what it takes to plan them. What you'll see is over the probably in Q1 of next year, we're going to do a workshop on how to plan events. Like, we're literally going to do a hands-on workshop. So all of this is, we'll talk about our events committee that we're kind of forming and that we meet regularly. We meet a couple times a week. So we'll talk about that as we go, and we'll talk about the resources we're kind of providing for some of this stuff and how this all came to be. But just know that it's hard, right? It's going to take some time. It's going to take some experimentation to really succeed at planning successful events. And like everything else we discuss, you really need to stick with it over the course of some time to make it successful. So, it's something that you got to experiment with. I remember starting meetups a number of times, having 1 or 2 or 3 people show up, even though you had 8 or 15 or 20 people RSVP. We're going to talk about all that. So just know event planning is hard. There's a lot of things to do. You just got to stick with it. You can join our committee as we go, and we'll explain how to do that. And then Joe has his own disclaimer he wants to make about events.
I'll add to yours first in that it's hard. It also takes more time than you expect. We'll talk more about this too, but it's amazing how much time it requires to do this. So it requires dedication. If you're going into this episode looking to learn, first step, you need to be dedicated to whatever you're doing here. Now onto my disclaimer. I don't like events. I never really did. I'm not someone that regularly goes to events. I will not plan a public event, maybe with my close friends, but not something public. And if it were not for Reimar, we would not have any events at Finsweet. We would not be doing this episode. We may not even have this live stream because I don't like it, the event side of it. I don't like planning it. I don't like the concept of it. However, I am converted. This was the old me, and I am very quickly becoming a fan of events and pushing even more for this type of activity because I see the value in it. I see that these events, even if 10 people show up or there's 30 people watching or 100 people watching, it's valuable. It's really, really important. So as someone who didn't like events, if you're one of those people, you can come over to the other side. I'm here. It's really nice. So that's my disclaimer. I'm recently converted.
Yeah. Yeah. And if people know my background, they probably don't, but I got started in local community. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is about using events to grow, but starting to build a network, right? Starting to kind of make those connections. And a lot of this, COVID pushed a lot of this stuff online. So I think the online events have a lot of they have a lot of value in our current day, but the in-person stuff really matters too, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about why events can help, why planning events can really take elevate your status to the next level, and then walk through that process just a little bit. Joe, any other thoughts before we jump right in here?
Let's jump in.
Cool. Okay, so why can events help, right? Events essentially allow you to set yourself up as a subject matter expert, right? And so Is a catch-22 though. If you're not a subject matter expert and you host bad events, we're going to talk about this at the end, like things to avoid. We're going to talk about pitfalls to avoid when it comes to event planning. I think there's like 7 things to just like don't do these things when you're planning events. And so we'll run through those. Those will be at the end. The rest of the show is going to kind of be focused on the stuff to do. But like setting yourself up as a subject matter expert, anytime you're teaching stuff, right? This is the reason YouTube tutorials are so great, right? People don't know that they're making a YouTube tutorial. They're essentially doing what you might do in a meetup, except for you're doing it for an audience asynchronously at any kind of given time. Whereas an event is more about getting people together and doing something in real time. So sometimes I think like the value of these live streams is in getting the folks together, interacting in the comments, and actually having that interactive stuff, right? So share your thoughts right now. This is where we'll jump into the first question, kind of prompt for the audience. Like, share your thoughts about events that you've hosted. Has anybody hosted events? Have you had problems? Have you had success? Is there like a part of the process that you'd like to see us address like later on in the show when we get into the Q&A? I know some of you folks are regularly hosting events, live streams, things like that. So, chime in as far as like setting yourself apart, as a subject matter expert. Again, when people are coming to you to learn about something, this elevates you. Like one of the best ways to learn something fully is to teach it. And so when you get a group of people in front of you and you deliver high quality content over and over again in this live stream, at events, at whatever it is, people keep coming back, right? I always tell people, if you can be the person people come to and get just a little bit smarter, right? If I can interact with you and take a little nugget from that interaction and go share that with friends and they think I'm smarter because of that, I'm always going to come back to that well for more, right? I'm always going to want to come back and have more of that experience. And so the more times you can create opportunities to do that, to give people a little nugget, to give people a little something that they can take away and showcase with the world or kind of claim as their own knowledge now, and it makes them look smarter to the world or provides value in their lives, they're always going to come back for that. And so when you plan events, that's kind of like the key moment, is to separate yourself, the group, the planning committee, the organization, whatever it is, to elevate themselves to the next level. We just saw this with Webflow as the no code conference. They didn't call this the Webflow conference, right? They didn't call this the Webflow user group conference. They called it the no code conference. Why? Because Webflow wants to set themselves apart as the subject matter expert, as the leader in the no code space, right? And then they bring other people in to add credibility to that, right? They bring the bubbles in, they bring the Airtables in, they bring all the other folks around, right? They get the local sponsors, the agencies, et cetera, to come in, and that builds credibility. That sets them apart as a leader in the industry. So that's kind of the biggest thing. That's the biggest why for events. There's a couple other things in here. But Joe, any thoughts you want to chime in on some of that?
This logic applies to all different scales. We're talking about Webflow with a huge event that, us at Finsweet, anybody listening on this stream, we can't pull off event that size with that many things going on. But we can scale that down to tiny. We could be teaching 2 people. We could be the subject matter expert of 1 person. Really, these principles apply to every level.
Yeah.
Whether you have 5 people, 100 people, 10,000 people, or 1,000,000 people, it's all the same concepts. So just because we're talking about no code conf, or maybe we talk about clone comp or F and growth, that doesn't mean that you have to have your event at that scale.
Yeah.
You start anywhere.
Yeah. And you don't start with big events. If you're like an
Mhm.
event rookie, do not start with big events. Start with small events. Start with a local meetup. We'll talk about that as the next step. But start small and scale up, because there's millions of moving parts with event planning and it can be overwhelming. And the worst thing you can do for your event trajectory is to host a dud event. We'll talk about that towards the end as well. Like, it's better to have small events that run smoothly than have big events that run poorly. And for a million reasons, which again, we'll discuss throughout the rest of this. But let's talk a little bit more about why events can help. And the next thing I wanted to say is that events help you market yourself without coming off as spammy, right? If you just want to advertise all the time, if you want to like just, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me, events is the perfect way to do this, because nobody who signs up for a value-driven event ever gets mad when they hear too much or gets too much information about the event, right? Usually people are looking for more information about the event. They want to know details. They want specifics. They want this, that, the other about the event. And so this gives you an opportunity to release a video, then tweets, and then social media, and then constantly be reminding, hey, the event's next week. Hey, it's 2 days from now. Hey, it's in an hour, right? And those things don't come off as spammy marketing, right? And so events give you an opportunity to be very self-promotional, to keep your event and brand in front of people without coming off as super spammy, which again is a great thing. This doesn't mean you can't spam people with event notices, right? This doesn't mean that you can't overwhelm people, especially if like you have email notifications that go out as every part of this. But again, this allows you to have many different touch points across a ton of different channels that will not come off as spammy if done effectively. Which again goes back to making yourself look like a leader in the space, right? If you do all these things, if you're hosting events regularly, if you're making noise about these events on a regular basis, and people are seeing this, well, they're gonna be like, oh, who's this person? What are they doing? Why are they doing this? And then they start thinking like, well, why am I not doing this? And then they come to the event to see what it's all about, and maybe they like it, and maybe they stick, and they, maybe they meet somebody, maybe they make a connection with somebody else in the group, maybe they want to start their own thing, right? We just announced Jonathan had a little podcast. There's a couple folks that have started live streams, as a function of kind of interacting with this stuff, and so like this is what it leads to, right? At some level, like I started by watching Nelson's videos. I started by watching Nelson's videos. Every once in a while, Nelson now jumps into our audience and he, checks us out. And so we still watch his videos, but every once in a while he comes in and he checks ours. And down the road, somebody else will lead and kind of step up and they'll follow this advice and we'll be watching them. In a year, we might be watching somebody in this audience who started their own channel, who's doing their own thing. And that's the cool part of this, right? Is it inspires other people to do the same thing, which again, sets you up as a leader just by default. Right? Just by default, all of these things kind of elevate you into that leadership position. Okay. Joe, any thoughts on that before we move over to the next? We're going to start talking about like how to start this, getting local, etc.
I'd love to touch more on the education side and the knowledge side to make sure that as you're thinking about these events, there's some value to the people coming. That if I don't seem spammy, it's because there's something I'm giving away that's valuable, right? So if you're not giving anything away, if you're not teaching something, if you're not giving some knowledge or something of value, then you do come off as spammy. So make sure of that.
Yeah.
Don't take this spammy comment as I can send out as much stuff as I want. You can only do that if that content, if that subject matter is really worth getting that information, that notification for.
Yeah, and this is something that you'll build a track record for. It's really easy. Like if you start hosting events and you get 3 or 4 people there and the event's kind of like meh, it's hard to get those 3 or 4 people to come back for another event, let alone draw 3 or 4 more people in, right? So if you can get those 3 or 4 people to stick, and then being 3 or 4 more people, now you got 8 people. Right? And then maybe you get like a certain percentage of those to stick and you bring 3 or 4 more. Now you got 12 or 14 or 15. Then you do that again. And now you got 30, and so it won't always keep scaling like that. You won't always bring, so you may hit a plateau where like, okay, at our events, we got 10 or 15 people and we regularly do that. And then you set a goal for the group to how do we get to 20? How do we get to 30? How do we get to 50 people showing up at these events? And next thing you know, you're hosting, open houses with 500 people showing up over the course of like 3 or 4 hours. Right? And that stuff can happen. And so let's get into some of the like local stuff, and not necessarily local in the context of, because the internet's making everything local, right? Niches are essentially like the online version of local, but let's talk a little bit about like creating online events, and creating meetups, right? Local meetups. I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about, because this is where I come from, right? I started, probably a decade ago now, a WordPress meetup. And I didn't start the meetup. I actually showed up at a meetup. I showed up at this meetup that was already happening. It was a small WordPress group locally. And I popped into this thing. And it was kind of one of those things where like you could tell they had been doing this for a while. There were people that had they're showing up because they're showing up and because they're interested in WordPress. And they wanted to be around other people that were interested in WordPress. But like the group was just kind of stale. And what I found out was that the lady who was running it had been doing it for a couple years. She was no longer really interested in updating it, so she wasn't doing anything exciting. And she was looking for someone to come and take it over, but she didn't want to kind of like let the group die. And so they were just getting together just to get together, but there wasn't a lot of effort being put in. And I was like, hey, me, like I can do this, like I would love to take a stab at this. And so immediately I start just surveying the folks in the group. I recruited a couple folks to help me plan, right? So the next meetup, I had like a couple folks show up and I was like, hey, we're going to become the planning committee and, we'll figure this stuff out. And next thing you know, we found out that the location was not convenient for most of the people in the group. So we moved the location. We figured out the topics were not what people were super interested in. We asked them what they wanted to do. And next thing you know, we got a cool group, right? And then 25 people are showing up, 30, 40 people are showing up, and we start streaming this stuff and it starts leading back to revenue, right? I'm a freelancer starting out. I was just trying to learn about WordPress. Next thing you know, I'm hosting these meetups and people are reaching out to me to hire me to build their WordPress sites, right? And so there's this tremendous value in making this connections or building these small communities. And they don't have to be huge. You don't have to have hundreds of people attending your events, right? Our early events were 10 or 15 people. And that's when I started building traction that started attracting the different businesses and into that group. And so when I made the switch to Webflow, of course, I was like, well, I got to, move this meetup into the world of Webflow. And that's off to the races. That's how we end up here. That's how I end up meeting Joe. That's how we end up with Clone Comp and the open house and the ugly website party and all these other things that we've done over the last, 2 or 3 years. So the value of that, the value of starting somewhere and creating this type of community is kind of, it's not really, I don't know how you measure it. Like, I don't know how you measure it over time.
It can't be measured. You just have to meet one person, right? It doesn't matter how many people are there. One person can make a huge impact on your future, whether that's a new big project or somebody that you start to partner with on something, or you get hired somewhere else, or you hire somebody else. That was such a great story. I mean, really what Reimer was saying is he put himself in front of so many people through this event, and through these people, he funneled business to himself. He funneled revenue to himself. And then it led to Webflow, and then it led to Finsweet, and now it's leading to this and the future of what we're doing. That's a huge progression from just, hey, I'm going to take over this WordPress meetup. So that's really powerful to know just meeting a few people can make a huge impact on your future.
Well, and it got me into a place where like I didn't know everything I needed to know about WordPress. So as I was landing projects, the people would come to me and they needed stuff that I wasn't exactly sure how to do. And so through this network, I had resources that I could go and rely on to either refer work or to get help or to ask questions or whatever. And that was like really important for me in my development. Not to say that these resources weren't available online, but we all know the value of kind of having somebody there who can walk you through some of this stuff or give you a little hand holding as you like make these things happen. And that's really the value of like these one-on-one relationships, right? I think a lot of people want to get online and they want to build a community and they want to just grow and be big. And like, they want to start with 100 viewers on every live stream, And it just doesn't work that way. You have to start with those one-on-one relationships before you can start building the one-to-many relationships, which allow you to grow a thriving community, right? And so you have to do those one-to-one relationships. You have to foster that little network. And this is really, and again, COVID has kind of made this a little weird, but the local thing cannot be overstated, and doing these in-person things cannot be overstated. There's something that happens when you just get people into a room. We experienced this recently with our Finsweet. We did a company retreat. I saw during No Code Conf, Claudia had a few of the Floxy's ladies come, and they were all, there watching her do her presentation. They were hanging out in person. So as much as doing stuff online is fun and cool, nothing beats being in the same room doing that stuff. So I would encourage you, if you're exploring this meetup thing, if you're thinking about how to start a meetup, if you're looking to do some of this, start in person. Find one person to hang out that really loves what it is you're doing. Find 2 or 3 people to hang out and turn that early group into a little events planning committee, right? Like put those people, to work. And you together, now, it's not just you spamming the event. Now you have your other people that promote the event with you and that work together. And that all helps kind of grow the group. And so that's really how you take the next step. When I took over that WordPress group, again, one of the first things I did was I looked and asked, hey, who else has been coming here for a while and would love to help like keep the group alive? And 2 or 3 people raised their hands, and I was like, cool, let's grab lunch in a week, 2 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long it was. And I said, let's plan. And we got together as a small little committee, and we said, what can we do to grow this group? And other people had good ideas. You're not going to have all the best ideas when it comes to like doing this stuff. You're never going to have the best. That you can have good ideas, but even good ideas need refinement, and having other people to kind of bounce those ideas off of. Tell, like sometimes you need to hear like, oh, that's not going to work real well, or what about this? And you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And you think your hot shot idea, now has all these bullet holes shot through it. So having a group of people to kind of peer review this stuff and kind of validate some of what you're thinking through as it relates to events is really important. Joe, any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, let's talk about how we can do this. Let's talk about the types of events, how people can get started with this. The online versus in person, educational networking. The in person is great, but I know that a lot of people can't do in person. So we're talking about in person a little bit, but we know that it's not possible for some people. It's
Sure.
just not. Could be location, could be money, it could be a number of reasons. Going digital really can get you an event at zero cost, which is beautiful. The only cost is your time, and you'll need a lot of it. So I like when Reimar said, get some people together and start doing this together, because it may be too much for one person to do. And
Mm.
if you have a little committee of 2 or 3 or 4 people, now you have a guaranteed 4 people at your event. Already it's
Right.
starting to work, and people are starting to talk, even if it's just one extra person. So yeah, think in person if that's possible. That's a really great thing if you can do that, but go digital if
Yeah.
you have to. You can start a digital hangout, a digital event next week.
Yeah.
That's really the power, the world that we're living in.
Yeah. And I Maria Carava is saying here, I know you're all dying to meet in real life. Yeah, 100% we are.
Yeah.
And we want to do more of that. And I'd encourage you to do as much of that as you feel comfortable with, meeting in person now. But for sure, online is like, it's easier, right? It's easier to
Mm.
do things. Okay. It's easier to set up an event online because it takes no work. You go create a little event page. That doesn't mean it's easy to get people to show up, right? That doesn't mean
Mm.
it's easy to make it entertaining.
Mm.
That doesn't mean it's easy to, manage the timeline and make sure everything flows. And, there's a cardinal rule in hosting events that says never let go of the mic. Like when you're an MC, you never let go of the mic. And online, you kind of have to let go of the mic, right? If I'm in person and I give someone, I can put the mic in their face and I can let them talk. And then when it's time, I pull the mic away and I'm back in control of the meeting. Online, when we're in a Zoom call or we're in a whatever, and somebody just can talk or maybe not mute themselves and you hear the background. And so like there's a million things that can still go wrong with online events. The biggest thing here is really just to get started, right? Find a couple people, and maybe your online thing leads to in-person events, right? Maybe you want to start doing something and there's not enough people. We talk about this all the time when it comes to like looking for work, how you shouldn't just, be stuck in your local market. I agree with this to a certain extent, but when it comes to online events, I would encourage you to find ways to make the regional. But anything you can do to start creating events, to start creating community, to start pulling people together, we'll start doing some of the things we talked about for why events are important, right? Like all of those things will start to build the credibility, start to set you up as a leader, and you can grow, right? And that stacks. So let's see, what was online versus in person? We have the next. Oh yeah, the variety of events. And this, I
Mhm.
think, gets to, doing the online and in person. Like we experiment with both of those, right? Like we don't and haven't over the last couple of years done as many in-person events as we'd like. Obviously, we all know why that's going on with COVID. But we have hosted a variety of events, right? We do short events, we do long events, we do live streams, we do multi-day events, we do competitive events, we do hangout events, we do learning events, we do all sorts of different types of events. And this can be hard to do as you go. You may have a hard time figuring out like what your groove is. Maybe your group wants to do more educational style events. Maybe your group wants to just get together and talk about a certain topic. Maybe you want to start a community or a group that's not necessarily about Webflow. That's a secondary item. Maybe you want to talk about, how freelancing does whatever, and you start introducing people to tools. Like, there's a million ways to start this stuff and find people who, are interested in hanging out. And the other thing is, you don't always have to start the group. There may be somebody else who started a group or who has a group that's looking for someone like you to join their committee, to be a part of the team, to kind of help carry the water. And so, there's a number of ways to kind of get creative and create variety in the types of events that you host, in the formats, in the length of the events, in just the way that you structure these things. The biggest thing is to always kind of make a promise to the attendees, and then at the event, deliver on that promise, right? The title, the event description, the hype before the event is like the promise, right? You're setting some kind of mechanism that says, we're setting a threshold for doing this. Come to this event and you're going to achieve, accomplish, experience this, connect with whatever, right? Like whatever that promise is. If you deliver on that promise at the event, people are likely going to show up for your next event, right? And that's essentially it. And this is why starting small makes a lot of sense, because it's easy to experiment with a small group, with a small format. If you're trying to do a speed building challenge with like 30 people for the first time, that's going to be really hard, right? Just handling the logistics, managing how much time do you show each person's screen? How long does a competition last? Like, all these things matter. How much time do you give people to share their work and to connect, right? The event, remember, is not just about you. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that and the things to avoid. I wanted to,
Love the promises comment.
yeah,
The promises comment, it's so true. We talked about this in a dedicated episode, I believe, about sales. That in order to grow your business, in order to be great at sales, you have to make promises and then deliver on those promises. And that's how you gain trust between whoever you're selling to. So you start with the small promises. I'm going to send you a Loom video tomorrow. I'm going to respond to this email in 2 days. Then I'm going to deliver this milestone this. Then I'm going to deliver the project this. And you hit all those. At the end of the project, you have a happy client and a returning customer. This same concept applies with events, and I'm sure it applies to any other thing that you're doing in your life.
yeah.
You tell someone you're going to do something, you do it, they trust you. And that's how you get people coming back and back and back to your events.
I think one of our first episodes was on how to make promises, making key
Yeah,
promises to
yeah.
grow your brand. I think it was like literally one of our first 5 episodes. We talked specifically about this, and yeah, it transfers right over into events. And like Joe said, everything you do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about like experimenting with events too. Like, don't be scared to try something new, right? We like Clone Comp, which is, for the second year in a row, was the biggest Webflow hackathon on the planet. We had hundreds of participants this year. That event started as like a speed building challenge that I think 10 people showed up to, maybe 8 or 10 people showed up to. And at the end of the challenge, and this is something I encourage everyone to do at the end of your meetups, do a retrospective, especially like with a small group. Hey, do we like that? Do we want to do more of that? What do we want to do next week? Like if you get people involved in planning the meetup, they're more likely to show up to the next meetup, right? If we got a small group and I ask, hey group, what do we want to learn next week? And you say, I want to learn this, and the other person says this, and the other person says that. Well, if the next 3 meetups are those things, I can probably count on X, Y, and Z to show up to those meetups, right? They're more likely to come back and do some of that. So experimenting with events, going back to the Clone Comp story, at the end of that speed building challenge where there was like 8 or 9 of us, we talked and we started talking about how do we make this more exciting? How do we make this more dynamic? What could we do? And that led to a bunch of Spitfire ideas, which then we digested and turned into Clone Comp, right? Year 1 of Clone Comp. And it just evolved into something that became crazier than we ever expected, right? Like after the first year of Clone Comp, I just remember looking at Joe and Colleen and being like, damn, that was really special, and it was hard to kind of tell people what had happened if they hadn't experienced it. This is how you build community, right? You let people become part of these special experiences that then become stuff people buzz about. And then other people have that FOMO. They're like, oh, why wasn't I there? Well, you know, and so the next time, then they want to be there, right? And so experimenting with events and pushing the limits, asking the community that shows up, how do you take this next level? What can you do to really like up the production value, to up the experience? Think about like, it's show business. Think about, again, go back to the Webflow's no code videos that they did at the no code conference, right? Like the production value was through the roof. They must have hired some kind of theatrical production company to build a stage and to manage a set and to do all of this stuff. Now, I don't expect any of you to do that all at your scale, but you can do whatever your version of that is, right? You can figure out how to have a little intro to your video that doesn't work properly, and then you can all laugh about it at the end. And you know, but it creates the effort, right? The experimentation, the trying. Like people appreciate that. We talk about building in public, you know, with working on all this stuff, but events can be the same thing. You can build events and build community in public. And again, people will be gracious as long as you're honest, as long as you're delivering value, as long as you're genuine in what you're doing. I really think that you can push the limits here. And don't just do like we're all going to meet up and do a slide presentation and let me read you these 10 slides that I prepared. And, you know, at the end we do a Q&A. You know, what's the... you know, like figure out what you can do to kind of punch it up a little bit, right? To get interactive. A lot of times these events turn into like one-way communications, and you want to figure out how to like, you know, get the people involved, right? If I just want to do a one-way thing, I do a stream, right? This is what the streams are for. It's for me and Joe to get up here. We talk about something interesting that hopefully you'll have value. When we want to interact and when we want to do the hangouts, we do the events. We jump in together. We do, right? And so don't host meetups and treat them like a live stream, right? Like don't do this meetup thing and then bring people in and just like dump for an hour and pretend like people are going to get excited to come back. You got to find ways to engage them early on. And this is where that experimentation comes in, right? Find ways to bring the folks who show up to your meetups in at different parts. So that you can, you know, again, build on that, grow from that, and learn from those different experiments. Joe, any thoughts there?
Yeah, that last thing you said, don't host meetups and treat them as live streams. You know, you have to make sure that you are presenting what you're presenting in the right context, in the right content form. Very much like a policy we have at Finsweet, if the video meeting can be a message, send it as a message. If it can be a Loom video recording, send it as a Loom video recording instead of the meeting. So if you're hosting a live event and this could be a pre-recorded video on YouTube, it should be a pre-recorded video on YouTube. Don't force it into the event. If you're sending out some white paper, don't have an event to release the white paper. That white paper is probably best sent an email. So if you're getting people together, make sure it's something that requires or is best done when people are together.
Yeah. And in that example, you could for sure like release the white paper, and then the meetup could be like, let's go over the bullets. Let's look at the highlights. Let's do whatever. Just don't get people to the meetup and just read the thing that could have been released as a thing to read. You know, you treat the thing for the format it's supposed to be, and create opportunities for not just you to share information and knowledge, but for other folks to be able to share information and knowledge with you, and more importantly, for them to be able to share knowledge and information with each other. Like that's where your community really starts to grow. It's no longer when you become the linchpin for all of the interactions in the community. It's for when people start interacting with themselves and take ownership and start growing and percolating their own ideas inside of some of this. That's where you can really catch momentum and take your events to the next level. And with that being said, I want to talk about 7 specific things to avoid. I think that makes sense. One last thing before we go to that. Niching down on your events types. You can do this to get started. You may want to come up with some kind of format that works. Experimenting. But when you find something that works, like when we found the speed building thing works, okay, we'll do that. And we have a template for that, right? Doesn't mean every one of our events is going to be a speed building thing, but we have that template now. We can share that template with other folks, right? Clone comp. We're starting to build processes and structure to this. And so, you for sure want to like focus on that. Once you experiment, you kind of want to formulate those into like plans that you can just say, oh, okay, once a quarter, we're going to do this. Once a month, we're going to do this, or every 6 months, we're going to do this. And those things help you then plan and have an outline for how to plan. But as you are planning, and I guess that's a big thing. Did we skip over that? Making sure we had a plan. Where's my agenda to do here? Yeah, we'll talk about that at the things to avoid. Let's just go through that in the things to avoid. Let's just jump into the things to avoid. There's 7 like key pitfalls here to kind of avoid when it comes to event planning. And we'll start just right at the top. Managing RSVPs is the hardest thing to do, right? One of the hardest things to do is get people to RSVP and commit to being at an event, and then actually getting them to show up, right? Online, in person, doesn't matter what kind of event you do, like, you're gonna run into this issue, and you want to make sure your RSVPs, and we've made this mistake a ton of times where we're like, oh, we'll have a sign up over here, we'll have a sign up over there, we'll have this person can have their own sign up for this page, and next thing you know, it's like, oh my god, where are all our RSVPs? Like, where are these folks coming from? And so we don't know then how to get an accurate head count. We don't know how to predict how many people will show up. And in person, this can be a big deal because seating, and if you're gonna have snacks, or if you're gonna have whatever prepared, or maybe in the space of the venue, you don't want a place for 100 people and then 20 people show up. That's no good. Like, it looks empty. But conversely, you don't want to have a space for 20 people and 100 people show up. Like those things like matter. And online, same thing. Like, we ran into this with our community, our global open house in Gather, right? The spirit of that event was, hey, let's get the other meetup organizers to have landing pages and promote their events. And so we had like 20 different sign up pages because each person was supposed to like RSVP to their local meetup. And when it came time to the event, we didn't know how many people were coming, right? We could add up all the different RSVPs on the different pages, but that didn't really give us an accurate number. And then Vlad ends up tweeting about it right before the event, which sends us over. And then we have bandwidth problems inside of Gather because we weren't able to make that RSVP count accurate, right? And so first things first, when it comes to events, picking your platform, managing where they're going to kind of come and sign up and get information about the event is a priority. And it's not something that's like super easy every single time. We don't get this perfect every single time even, right? And we're still experimenting with what's the right platform, what's the best way. We're going to be building a membership section for our community to handle some of that, but it's hard, right? So pick a platform that works for you, whether that's Meetup, Bevy, Eventbrite, whatever it is, and go through there, manage your RSVPs in a single place. Second thing to avoid, don't assume everyone who RSVPs will show up, right? It's like there's a huge attrition rate when it comes to signups versus people who actually show up. Anybody who's organized events online or otherwise will attest to this. You could have 100, especially if you're promoting an event like weeks ahead of it, right? The further away people RSVP, the less likely they are actually to show up the day of, right? You actually there's like a 2-week sweet spot before an event that really lends itself to promoting. I know a lot of people like to promote their events a lot earlier than that. I don't like to do anything other than just like a save the date thing before 2 weeks out, unless it's a major event. And then you can trickle things out, a month out, 2 months, whatever, but for most of the events, for most of the small meetups, you only need 7 to 10 days, right? Especially if you're doing this on a regular basis, setting a reoccurring date, right? So if you're going to meet the first Wednesday, if you're going to meet every Tuesday at noon, if you're going to meet, the third Thursday of every month, whatever it is, build some consistency. That will help people show up and help increase those numbers. But just don't assume that everyone who signs up is going to show up. That can be a big mistake. Joe, any thoughts on either of those first 2 steps, things to avoid?
Yeah, but be ready for failure.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be ready to accept that. You have to be ready to be excited that 10 people RSVP'd yes and 0 people showed up. And you have to say, well, it happened this time. How do we make it not happen the
Yes.
next time?
Yeah.
So just be prepared for that. It happens.
Yeah. What's up, Connor? Finlayson just joined. He's loving the new stream banners. Yeah. Whole new package here. So I agree with that, Joe. Prepare for failure. You plan for success. Prepare for failure.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have kind of both. You got to prepare. Everything's going to go smooth. Everything's going to go perfect. But then you got to know that the day of, something could go wrong. Events are fluid. Things change. which kind of brings, let's go into the avoid number 3 here, which is exactly what we're talking about here. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Events need an agenda. You need a flow. You need some kind of structure, right? Like step 1, planning an event, pick a date, pick a time, pick a topic, right? Like that's the core, is like figure out what the event's going to be about. Step 2, outline the show flow, the run of show, the agenda for the event. What's going to happen the moment people get there? What's going to happen before people get there, right? Is there some kind of welcome period? Is there some kind of networking moment? Is there some icebreaker? Like what is going to happen before people show up, after people get there, when the program starts, how long are each section going to be, and stick to that timeline, right? Like having a plan for your event is a lifesaver when things start going wrong. Because if you like we were talking about the last one, if you get overwhelmed with people, or if not enough people show up, or if something happens, the last thing you want to be doing is worrying about like adjusting the schedule or the flow of the event, right? You want to have that stuff ahead of time, and you kind of want to announce that stuff ahead of time too, because this goes back to setting the promise. An agenda helps set a valuable promise that you can then deliver on over the course of the event. So it's real important to have a strong agenda and a plan for any event that you're going to host, and to kind of stick to that as you go. It can be enticing in the moment when not enough people show up to just like throw the whole plan out the window and like freestyle the event. Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But and you can always choose to do that. It's hard to retroactively just come up with a plan that's going to work, right? So it's you can always improv. You can never like plan on the fly, right? That's not planning. That's literally improvisation. So it only goes one way. So you can divert from the plan, but if you don't have a plan, you're more likely to experience failure as you go, which brings us to do not do number 4. This is like my biggest pet peeve here. Don't waste my time, right? Like Joe said, if it's a press release, send a press release. Don't bring me to an event to read a press release. Do something around the press release. Explain the press release. Tell me about the thinking of the press release. Bring something else into the picture, but don't disrespect my time in any way. If the event's an hour, give me an out point at an hour, right? Don't tell me it's an hour event and then let the event run for an hour and a half without a place for people to leave, or without people to, because there's nothing you want to see more or less at your event than people getting up and leaving in the middle of a presentation, right? And this happens when you go over, because people got shit to do, right? If I committed to an hour event or a 2-hour event and you're going for 4 hours, I don't have an extra 2 hours to give you, right? Sometimes I do, maybe I don't. And so, and this is a good way to get people to not want to come back to your event, right? If things drag on, if your 2-minute presentations turn into 10-minute presentations, if your 10-minute presentations turn into 30-minute presentations, you know, like as these things run on, that one missed point at the beginning trickles through the entire agenda, right? If your intros are 10 minutes over, now your first event is 10 minutes late. Now that speaker, to try to hit the deadline, either has to cram, or now they're shortchanged. You're disrespecting that person's time too. So you're not only disrespecting the audience, but you're disrespecting other presenters. And so this is why that plan and agenda really makes a lot of sense and is really important when it comes to, you know, planning and organizing events. Thoughts on those last two, Joe?
Yeah, I'm passionate about that last one, regardless of what the context is. Very important in events, very important in any part of business. Always, always, always have respect for the other person's time. Super important. So yeah, I love that that's in this list.
Yeah, it's just update attendees to peoples. Oh, Peoples. Oh, this is why you don't try to create show notes on the fly, huh? Okay, there we go. I don't know why. Like, I can never type when people are watching. Like, if it's not you know, I can do a million miles an hour. As soon as you put a camera on, or like we're on a call or something, it's like I have fingers that are 3 inches wide each and just hit all the wrong letters. Okay, so next thing to avoid number 5. Do not send people home empty-handed. This is like your job. This is going back to delivering on the promise. If I come to an event, I want to take something away from that event. I want to learn something. I want to meet someone. I want to like whatever it is, right? Like I want to teach something. I want to do whatever it is I'm there at the event to do. Sometimes that's just learn and be around other people. Perfect. If you're hosting a networking event, great. We just want to drink a beer and hang out and we want to strengthen the relationships. Cool. That's kind of a, that's a more casual meetup. And the value of that could just be interpersonal, but you really want to make sure you send people home. Going back to the the point I made at the beginning with like, if you become the person where people go to get little nuggets that then they use in their world or share in their world, people keep coming back. This is exactly why, right? If you send people home empty handed, like, well, what's the point in going there, right? Everyone likes to walk away with something, and that doesn't have to be a tangible thing. You don't have to give away money or prizes or, like stuff, right? Swag. That's all icing on the cake. If you want to do some of that stuff, cool, that can help, but you don't need that stuff. What you need is to make sure that everyone leaves with a little something more than they came. That could be a relationship. That could be some knowledge. That could be just an experience, right? Maybe it was fun. Maybe they laughed. Maybe you distracted them for a while. That can be the thing, right? But definitely don't leave them thinking like, what the hell was that for, right? People know about like, there's a statement in show business, never leave the audience wanting less, right? And there's a moment where you just go over in an event where people are just like, didn't he just say that? Is he looping? Like, are we on V2 of this? Like what? So just, again, deliver some value. And we talk about this all the time. Joe, I think if there's any trend line in all of our streams, it's like that deliver value line.
Yeah. If you don't do that, people don't come back. That is a fact. If people are leaving the event thinking, what was that for? It will be very, very, very difficult to get that person at another one of your events, even if they've greatly improved. So yeah, this is incredibly important.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more. We're going to try to respect your time. I know we're running right up at that. So we'll give you an out here.
Let's go.
Okay, avoid number 6. Don't make it all about you. This goes back to like the don't just get up there and present your slide deck that you spent 2 weeks preparing, because that's what you did. And then you're just at the meetup and you're just in your slides and, like you're just going to give your presentation and you're there to connect. You're there to make eye contact. You're there to, like let other people share knowledge, make connections, do whatever. And so don't make the thing all about you. Actually, you should do the reverse. How do you make the event about the people who are there? How do you make it about shining as much light as possible on the speaker, right? How do you make it about divvying up the attention of the event so that everyone there feels like, oh, the event was kind of about me, right? And the more you do that, the more you get people involved and the more you get them coming back. Joe, I see you laughing there. What's up?
Yeah, that goes right back to the Twitter comment about not caring about money. It's the same concept. Don't care about yourself, care about other people. Those people will have a great time. The event will be better. And that huge benefit comes back to you way bigger than if you had cared about yourself for that event. Same concept without money.
Yeah, and Daniel nails it here. As an organizer, you're the guide, not the hero. Exactly. Yeah. And that's
Nice.
that's a reference to like the hero's journey, the story that kind of lies at the core of all great stories. And again, you're not always the hero. You can be the hero because you're hosting this, right? This is one of those things where like by default, if you're the event organizer, you are going to get the praise and the credit as long as everything goes right. It's like the quarterback. If the team's winning, quarterback's great. Team's losing, quarterback sucks. Right? Yeah. And you're the quarterback here. You're not necessarily like doing everything. You need the team, and the team is all the attendees and everybody else that's there. And you're kind of like making sure the parts move and that things move smoothly and that you're following the play calls, the plan, right? But the more you get other people feeling like they have ownership in the event, they have ownership in the content, they have ownership in their experiences, or that they have ownership in the relationships that they're building through those events, now you start building repetitive behaviors that lead to the growth of a group. And that's when you can get some really cool things happening. That's when you can get to that next level. So 100%, Daniel, good point there. And it's okay to promote your brand, right? It's okay to let people know, hey, our group is sponsoring this event or we're hosting this. It's okay to have a little moment where you mention yourself and you mention what you're doing. Again, just don't make it all about you, and tend to default to not sharing that stuff. And what you should want to do is you should want to figure out how to get people to ask you about those things, right? So how do you create intrigue? How do you and you do this by providing value and sharing knowledge, right? It goes back to setting yourself up as a subject matter expert, as the leader. When people see you as the leader, they'll come to you and ask questions, and they want to engage you because they want to be the leader, right? They want to be at that level. And so again, by default, this will kind of shine light on you. So even if you think you're not shining the light on yourself, you can sometimes overwhelm the spotlight or overwhelm the stage by taking too much of that spotlight. So, and lastly, the seventh thing to avoid is don't let other people take over your event. This is super easy to do as well, right? This can screw up your timing. It can break your agenda. It could be in the pre-planning process. Maybe you want to do a certain thing. You got a couple other people involved. Maybe you got too many people involved because your committee can be too big. You know, when you're planning a group for 10 people, you don't need 5 people to plan it. You need like 2 people to plan it, right? 5 people planning an event for 10 people is too many. There's just not enough stuff to do. And like people need to feel like they got something to do. And so then they start creating tension, or they want to do this, or they want, and then you got to try to tame those ideas, and that can create some butting of heads. And so you want to make sure that if you have a specific idea for a plan, be the person who brings the draft agenda to the meeting, right? Don't let somebody else write the draft agenda, because often when you come to a setup like this, the person who presents the idea, who presents the information in like a structured way, is usually the person who drives the show, right? And so, you know, in the planning process at the event, this is why following Maria Gurav is saying, don't let Maria talk. I don't know about that. You can talk every once in a while, Maria. We appreciate hearing your voice. But this goes back to the mic comment, where it's like, don't give up the mic, right? You need to be in control, so that, again, the 2-minute, if you say, hey, we're going to take 2 minutes to talk, you know, and it goes over, it's like, how do you get that back, right? And so don't feel bad. Okay, that's all your time, and taking control back of that timeline. Okay, hey, we have to cut this short. If you need to chat, you guys can connect over here, which gives you other things to think about. You know, where do people break out? Where do you foster that stuff in online space? And we're not going to be able to cover everything that leads into planning events. That's why we're planning like actual workshops on this. I could go for days on all of this stuff, but I do see we're at 1 o'clock, so I want to give people a good out as we transition to the next section. And we have just a couple final points here, Joe, but anything on the avoid stuff, on the things to avoid. And again, the timing stuff is not as relevant on the live stream stuff. People can unplug anytime. And I'm never going to notice that, you know, you shut off the computer screen. But when you're in person and people start shutting off their computer screen and they walk out the door, that's not a good signal to other folks in the room. And so again, that's like a taking over event, not sticking to the plan. Like, this all goes back together in itself. So Joe, any thoughts on those 7 things to avoid when it comes to event planning?
Yeah, I'll add one more thing here. Don't have hidden motives. There are a lot of companies out there that have an event and they say, this is for this event. This is for this purpose. I don't know, maybe it's training in a platform, or it's free this, or a goodie bag of this, whatever. There's some promise. And maybe they deliver that promise, but their motives are somewhere else. They're interested in having you do something else that's hidden behind everything else. And it's not a true, honest, passionate,
Yep.
"Hey, this is the event to do this thing." So be careful about that. You know, if you're having an event to teach people, make sure you go there to teach people. Make sure that teaching isn't the second thing on your mind, and bringing in new business is the first thing on your mind. It needs to be really authentic, or it doesn't work.
Yeah, this is the old bait and switch. You know, this is like this is the free stay at a hotel, but you just got to come listen to our timeshare pitch. You know, and you see this all the time. You know, you see events where people just get people together, and you know, they spend a bunch of time talking about themselves or their company, or it becomes like a big sales pitch. And you know, those folks are gonna throw crappy events. They'll get exposed, you know, every once in a while. But don't be that person. Don't be those people, right? Don't be those people. So I agree. And this goes back to the point we made about delivering on your promise, right? If you didn't promise it at the beginning and you're trying to sneak it in at the end or in the event or something, it's a little skeezy. You know, don't do that.
It's unhonest.
Yeah.
Dishonest.
Yeah. And the last thing here is expect the unexpected with events, right? So this is no longer our 7.5 or 8, we'll call it 8 because Joe threw a bonus one in there. But expect the unexpected when it comes to event planning. This is why having a plan is important, so that you can deviate from the plan when necessary. But having a plan, like, gives you room and makes you feel more comfortable having to shift. If I got to drop a segment, or if things are happening and we're like, oh, this is going really well, let's let this extend a little bit longer. These are decisions that can be made on the fly. But look out for things like dead air, right? Like, and this is, and on a virtual event can be even more important than online in an in-person event. But dead air is just spaces where there's no real agenda. There's no real like direction for the attendees. Nobody's on stage. Nobody's speaking. Like, you need something for intermission. If you're going to have a break at your event, if you're going to have time where there's not somebody on stage, you need to have direction for the attendees. You need to have some place where you're like, hey, go over here, or we're doing this right now, or if you need to, grab a snack, it's over here. And your job is to kind of be that quarterback again in these moments, to make sure there's no like awkward silences that extend for more than, a few seconds at a time. You don't want people just sitting around twiddling their thumbs for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes while you figure out what it is you're doing. This is one of those, this gets awkward, right? And especially if you're in a setting where people are expecting to be, taught or have some kind of presentation, it becomes like super awkward. We've all been in those moments where it just goes dead quiet and people are like, oh, should I talk? Are they going to talk? What's next? And like, it doesn't show confidence in what you're doing. And it's just, yeah. And things like random distractions will happen, spontaneous things will happen. People will flush they're on the virtual call that are not on. They will not mute themselves and maybe flush the toilet or something like that. We've had stuff like this happen at events. You got to be cool and calm as the organizer and just right through that stuff, right? So you have to kind of like have a rain jacket on, and these things all have to be just, let it slide right off you. And don't let them derail your process, and even if you do throw a dead event, even if something like this happens, like, don't just think like, oh, it's over, we're done with events. No, redeem yourself, figure out how to do it better next time. Learn and grow. This is all an iterative process. There's a lot of things that you can do. And if you're looking for like ways to get support in this, if you're watching this and you're like, now or in the future, if you're looking for how to get involved and take the next step, if you want resources for all of this, join our events committee. We meet a couple times a month. We're the folks that plan things like Clone Comp, the Global Open House. We plan speed building challenges. We're planning this ugly website party. We're planning this Atlanta meetup. There's lots of different things that we plan and are working on inside of this community. So if you're out there and you're like, I want to start a meetup, but I don't really know how. I want to start a group, but I don't have the resources, or I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the experience. Join the events committee. We're working on rebuilding a community section for all of our efforts here at Finsweet. We'll have a little something that will release, like a little single page ditty. Actually, we're using Notion just with relevant links and all the things. But Q1-ish next year, you can expect that we're going to have like a hub for all of this. But in the process, we've got a big event that we're planning in March. We're going to do that Global Open House again. And our goal is to seed not only that event, but a number of other groups around the world that are doing this stuff. And we're going to provide all these resources. We're taking all of the stuff that I've learned over the last 10 years of planning events, putting it into like Notion guides and instructional content. And we're going to, again, Finsweet style, we're going to give this away, right? At least V1, we're going to put this out there and make it open and available to anybody who wants. And actually, Joe just posted the events. Let me pin the message. Joe just posted the link to join the events committee. So if you're interested in any of that, I know some of you are already on the committee. Some of you have diligently been with us for a long time and are watching this all evolve. I think those folks will attest to, like, we're just eating our own dog food here. We're literally just relaying to you what's worked for us and being very transparent in how we're growing and operating all of this to take the next step. This is why we know it works. This is why we know we can do an episode like how to grow your Webflow business with events, because we're doing it. And we'd love to have you involved in some of that. So Joe, any thoughts on that as we wrap up here?
Yeah, that's a great way to get started. We talked this whole episode about getting started, and it can be difficult to get started on your own. So there's the option to find people. That is also possible, also difficult. Joining our events committee is a way for you to get started with these events, learn from what we're doing, help us start to understand the community, learn the community, and then it's going to be much easier for you to be in the community. You know, you'll have this really warm welcome being with us, and then also you'll be able to go off on your own and do your own little meetups as you become more experienced.
Yeah.
So a great way to get into it.
Yeah, and we're helping again foster some of those. We're building this shared gather space where you can do
Mhm.
virtual events without having restrictions for size and capacity. We've got an 80-person capacity in there, and we'll keep bumping that as it gets higher. Uh, so if you wanted to do events that are more than 25 in gather, that requires a paid plan. So if you want to do that in our space, no big deal. We'll hook you up with a little space in there. We'll give you access to build and like let's do it. We're here to like support a lot of this, and this is not revenue generating activities for Finsweet, but we understand the value so much. It's been so valuable to our business that we really want to pay this forward, and we want to teach other folks, and we know that by doing that will eventually lead to more eyeballs and more activity on our end. And so it's a cool loop, and we'd love to bring other people into that loop and show you how to create a loop like that for yourself. So let's see. Yes, I can't wait. The open house has made me go all in on no code. Yeah, Joel Whitaker here is saying,
Nice.
that the open house. A number of people I know, Claudia from the Flaxes community has mentioned that a couple times. That seeing that open house inspired her to start her own little group. Now she's got a great group growing. They're doing their own thing and gather, and it's a cool community that's flourishing. I see that happening all over the place in the no code space. So Joel, 100%. The open house will happen again in March, probably end of March. And so keep an eye out on that. Any other comments, thoughts, questions, anything from the crowd? Before we wrap up here, we've got, we can take a little bit of time for some Q&A if anybody's interested. Joe, any other thoughts?
Yeah, well, as people write some questions and we can answer them, I'd love to do a few updates on attributes that we
Sure.
didn't get to in the beginning. For anybody using attributes, we have been listening to what you've been telling us the past week, week and a half. And we've already implemented some really good updates. CMS Filter now has an active class that you can apply to checkboxes and radios and any other form element. So if you were one of the people asking about how do we get active with our checkboxes and radios, now that's a new option. You apply an attribute to it and you can choose which class is added to that checkbox. We also have a really nice update for the range slider. The range slider, there were some complaints about the library actually working too fast, that every movement of the range slider, the filter would run. So we implemented a release option where the range slider only updates when you release the handle.
Mm.
Great UX. So these were the two biggest comments we got in that first week, and we have already addressed them. We have already pushed out the update for those requests coming in. So we are very, very active in this. We are listening to you and we're building in this stuff for you. We're also releasing 6 tutorials over the next week. Today, we're going to release CMS Slider and CMS Tabs. Later this week, we're going to release Nest. We're going to release an overview of that new active class feature. We're going to release Range Slider and Previous Next.
Yeah.
So tutorials coming.
Yeah, I think there's so much. And we have a build Thursday. We're gonna do some live build stuff
Oh,
Thursday
yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, we are. We're going to be rebuilding several websites, the filter system of several community member websites. So I think a week ago, week and a half ago, we sent out a form, very quick on the live stream. If you were here, you could fill that out. We picked several people who had really nice filter systems set up, and we're going to rebuild their filter system with attributes. I think this Thursday, we're going to rebuild 4 filter systems. Maybe it takes about an hour, not exactly sure, but we're just going to go community member by community member, rebuilding that filter system with attributes. Great learning opportunity and great way to give back to the community.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, let's see if we're getting anything else. And we'll keep doing that. We're going to keep experimenting with all this stuff. We're going to keep creating content like this on a weekly basis, live, in person, produce videos. I think what you'll see over the next 6 months is our video release schedule is going to go pretty intense. We've been creating content for the last few months and editing and planning and producing this stuff, and now we're creating a content calendar to kind of like outline the release of all this. And so over the course of the next few months, you can expect to see our YouTube kind of volume increase. And I think you'll start to see us experiment more with like releasing some of this stuff in a live format, doing a little something where we rewatch some of this, we talk about some of it, we take questions from the crowd live, we watch the next little segment, we answer, we talk. And so we're going to experiment with all that. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you all. What you think we should, again, focus on next. You can go to finsweet.com/vote to share your thoughts with us. You can leave it in the comments right here and let us know, kind of what you'd like to see us focus some attention on here. And I wanted to address this from WKD here, saying it's not the subject, but he has an error message when you try to use client first. Spacing system works, but the core page structure doesn't. And then Joe responding, is this a site that was not originally built in client first? So WKD, if you could answer that. Sometimes, if you're coming from a blank project, you should be able to get it to work okay, but sometimes maybe there's some conflict there. I don't know, Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, WKD, I think this is a message that may have come from Finsweet extension. And the reason why this message may have come is we didn't recognize that the current project has enough client first classes in it. We didn't want to add certain things to your non-client first build as it may conflict with other things. For example, a container. It could be dangerous to add multiple containers and have you working in different instances. So this is probably from a site that was not originally built in client first. In that case, just make sure that you're following client first before you start using that extension. But if you start from a fresh project, this should not happen.
Yeah. Tanet is saying, is live build at 12 p.m.? Yes, the live build is at 12. So this Thursday we'll be live at 12 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have a YouTube video up after the show here that you can RSVP on. Joe WKD is saying, it was a blank project. I used the extension to add the core structure and space system. The page structure wouldn't work. That may be a bug. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, WKD, instead of starting from did you start from the clonable or a blank project? And yeah, we're not going to do full support here. WKD, blank project, start from the clonable, please. If you're using client first, there is no reason that you should not start from the clonable. Always start from the clonable. The only reason you wouldn't is if you are putting client first on an existing project. In that case, the project is already initiated. So start from that clonable. You won't have that problem.
Yeah, nice. Okay. I think that's it for anything we got today.
Nice.
Yeah. Here we go. That's it. Join the show.
The end of our event.
That's it. It's over, right? It's all over. So we appreciate y'all for hanging out with us today and always. Again, be sure to give that video a like if you're still watching. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not. And we will catch you all Thursday for a follow-up for a live build. Take care.